And we're thrilled to be up here on a steamy Friday morning from City Hall, where the police department is also located, but under construction up here in Gladstone. And welcoming on Rob Sanderson, Administrative Services Manager for the Gladstone Police Department, joining us on KCMO. Hey, Rob, good morning.
Good morning, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming in. So, first off, you've been busy this morning. There has been, as has been the lead story in the news this morning, an officer-involved shooting here in Gladstone. Quite a coincidence, of course. We know that the suspect is dead. There's a couple suspects at large. The officer involved has suffered minor injuries. What can you tell us? How can you update us on this story this morning and what you've been dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, mostly just checking in on my people. Anytime we have a situation like this, it's difficult for everybody within the department. It's the last worst-case scenario that anybody wants to have happen. So, just checking in to make sure my dispatchers are good. I know they're out there investigating now to make sure that, everything's thoroughly investigated and ensure that, everybody's done what they need to do. We collect all evidence and talk to everybody that's may or potentially be a witness. So a lot of moving pieces this morning for sure.
How about, when you're checking on the dispatchers, they're obviously, people don't think of them being on the front lines, but they are, right? So what do you check in with them to make sure that they've done, they haven't done? What's that process like?
Yeah, just to make sure that they're processing the events appropriately. It's difficult because, they can't be there. So a lot of times when they're hearing things, they may fill in the blanks. They don't have all the facts, and sometimes they are kind of the last ones to know those facts. So just ensuring that they're dealing with that appropriately. It was an overnight incident, so these particular dispatchers sleep during the day. So ensuring that, kids are off to school safely, they got something to eat, that, they're able to sit down and really take a break and a breather to ensure that they're processing it appropriately.
How many do you have of those for the overnight shift?
So typically 2 to 3 at a time. We have 9 total dispatchers here at Gladstone.
Okay. You feel like that's been sufficient in terms of numbers?
There's you could always use more, but it's one of those things. Dispatch is like, either nothing's happening or everything's happening.
That's how it goes, right?
With a critical incident like this, you can't have enough dispatchers. So last night there were 2 on.
Was that, in hindsight, I mean, it's never enough, I guess, right, in a situation like that. Jeez, unbelievable. So let's first talk about you, Rob. You came over. Fred Ferris, who's the chief here in Gladstone, he had spent time in Lenexa, and then he was down in the Wichita area, and then he came back up here to be up north. He was originally with KCPD. You know Fred from your time in Lenexa. But you were on the Lenexa force, and what's your story?
Yeah, so actually I met Fred in 2005. I was a police officer in Gulfport, Mississippi when Hurricane Katrina blew through. And they sent thousands of officers from all over the nation to come down to help us out. And Fred happened to be one of those. And I got partnered up with his team and kind of showed him around. And he was somehow impressed with me. And so about 9 months after Katrina, he began to recruit me. And I snuck in the back of his patrol car and got up here into the Midwest where we don't have hurricanes, thankfully. So I got on with Lenexa and worked with him and Carl Burst, who's now a captain here as well, for 15 years there. Unfortunately, in 2018, I suffered an injury in the line of duty, and then 2020 ultimately was medically retired because of that injury.
What happened to you in 18? Yeah,
so we ran a call on a party that had just come back from Afghanistan and was suffering. He had taken a job at a local company and apparently had been drinking on his break, and so they were driving him over to take a test, a urine analysis to prove that, and kind of do the HR paperwork. And he jumped out of the vehicle and tried to run into traffic on I-35.
So this was a veteran?
It was a veteran, yeah. So when we got the call, his employees or his supervisors were holding him kind of on the shoulder, trying to prevent him from running into traffic. And so when I pulled up, I was a patrol sergeant at the time. I was the first one on scene. They immediately stood up and kind of went hands off because the cops were there, and they wanted to make sure that I knew that they were there to help.
Yeah.
And so I already had great information. Thankfully, I've got wonderful dispatchers in Lenexa, and so he started to run back into traffic. We ended up wrestling on the shoulder. I was able to subdue him and put him out briefly due to a neck restraint. And when I put a first cuff on him, not to arrest him or anything like that, but to try to get him into an ambulance, get him some help, he woke up, and he was a very stout, strong guy and very determined. So we started kind of crawling back towards traffic on the shoulder. And then I encircled his neck again and kind of wrenched my back to get him off of his base. And when I did, I popped my thoracic and kind of went downhill from there. Luckily, another veteran officer arrived on scene and was able to help me kind of secure him and rode with him to the hospital, got the help that he needed. I'm not sure where he's at today, but I hope he is doing well.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's you've been dealing with that ever since?
Yeah, ever since. So it was I thought I'd just torn something in my back, like a muscle maybe, and it'd recover. I took a job in staff services to kind of take a back seat, and it never really was quite healing. And then when the riots started happening, they kind of asked for all hands on deck. I knew I couldn't load weight at that point.
In 2020.
In 2020. So that kind of started the beginning of the end for me. Physical therapy, surgeons, doctors to try to see what they could do to get me back, and ultimately it just wasn't able to come back.
How are you feeling today?
It hurts daily, but you know what?
Does.
A lot of people are in a lot worse shape than I am, so happy to, I probably walk around with no more pain than the average person.
Yeah.
I just can't stand for long periods of times. I can't load weight like I used to, and probably wouldn't be effective on the street if I had to face a similar situation.
Rob Sanderson is joining us, Administrative Services Manager here with the Gladstone Police Department. So let's talk about what you guys are doing here since you took over this role. There's some consolidation going on as well. No one likes to have their world kind of upended with consolidation, but it's consolidation that you believe will be beneficial to the taxpayer in Clay County, right? So what are you guys doing?
Yeah, so it's a co-location project. I know we're kind of playing semantics here, but consolidation would mean a forming of a brand new entity, but we're co-locating. So when I came over, this was well in the works as far as in theory. So we began a construction project a little over a year ago to build out a dispatch center that would hold not only the Gladstone dispatchers, but also Clay County and Liberty's dispatchers. So that was a challenge in and of itself. It's a renovation part of the building, so it wasn't a brand new section that they are building, but that's for the police department. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. We're able to pull resources and bring our neighbors into a similar or into a really nice center. So it's been a challenge to make sure that we're meeting the needs of not only our people, but also Clay County and Liberty, and give them a really great center to operate out of.
What are we talking about people-wise between yourself, Liberty, Clay County? I mean, how many people would be on a given time?
Anywhere from, 6 to 10 at the most, depending on what time of the day is, if there's supervisors around. Yeah.
And you're right. Consolidation's not the good word. It's because people freak out when they hear that word. Co-location, as you put it, the better word. So what does that mean then? Why is that beneficial to the Clay County resident?
Yeah, so it's, like I said, it's kind of pooling of resources. So PSAPs, or public service answering points, there's 3 of them right now that we're combining into one. And what that means for the taxpayer is now our partners over at MARC that service our 911s, they go to one spot rather than 3. So kind of 3 birds with one stone type of theory, if you will. And then the same thing with the Kansas City radio. We'll be able to use the same links to get out on the radio, so there's less hardware and equipment, less of opportunity for failure points, because now we're able to get all brand new stuff for everybody to come over. And I think the longevity of that, and then just pooling of the resources to 1 point rather than 3, is beneficial to the taxpayer.
And you guys are going to be in this building here?
We are. Yep. We'll be kind of actually right below where you're sitting now.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of construction going on up here. How long's this been going on?
We started, I believe it was June of last year, maybe July.
Was it a bond?
I'm sorry?
Was it a bond issue from the taxpayer that you guys voted on?
That I don't believe so. That's really outside of my realm of expertise.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
I know that there was some grant money that kind of helped make this happen, and each of those 3 agencies received some grant money to help build this facility.
So the other thing you do, Rob, is you're involved with property and evidence and records management. So let's use something like, unfortunately, this case this morning, an officer-involved shooting here in Gladstone. How does that part of your role factor into something like today?
Well, fortunate for me, I've got very smart people that work for me, so I'm not actually the one that has to go out and collect and photograph, but we do have a property officer, and I'm sure that with the officer-involved shooting team, they're going to call in other resources, but actual storage of all the evidence and property, because they'll take absolutely everything they think may be useful, or even if they're not sure, they'll take it into custody. So a lot of booking of property and evidence, a lot of interview tapes, to ensure that we maintain the continuity of evidence.
That's great. Rob Sanderson, Administrative Services Manager here with the Gladstone Police Department. Rob, we appreciate you being here, man.
Thanks, Pete. I appreciate you guys coming out. Hopefully the construction workers will keep it down just a little bit. They're being pretty quiet this morning.
We haven't heard much yet. If something happens, I'm sending Chris Castro here, our engineer extraordinaire, out to start yelling at him or something. So Chris will take care of that. He's a tough guy. So if not, we're sending you out if you don't
There you
mind.
go. Absolutely. Phone call away.
Oh, gosh.